Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again for our weekly class. It's so nice to have you all here. As I mentioned in the past, I appreciate the consistency of being part of this group and being part of this class. It means a lot. Okay, so let's get cracking. We are on day 79, page 230. Day 79, page 230. So this is an interesting, no, actually we're not, sorry. I skipped the page. We're on page 78, right? I was just seeing if you guys are paying attention. All right, as he says, that's, shaking our head. Right, I almost pulled one over you guys, but you guys are too smart for that. All right, okay, so we are on actually page 228, day 78. Day 78, page 228. So the question over here is like this, and this is a similar question that we've had beforehand. It's just bringing it out in a little different way and trying to bring out the halakha also in a stronger way. Because right now, right, we are dealing with a lot of the issues that we're dealing with is how to deal with a situation, even though you might have the right to say something, right? You might have a toelis or a purpose say something, but how to deal with the greater ramifications of the situation, right? That's really the main discussion that we've been dealing with last couple of weeks, the last cases. Please do me a favor, mute yourself if you have background noise. Thank you. So like last week, we had the discussion of, a child in your son's class or in your daughter's class or whatever it was, right? And how to deal with something like that. And we got off to a beautiful discussion about education. We spoke about education, right? But the topic that we originally started off with was that also not only the halakhic ramifications, but the outcome that might come out, right, of everything that is part of this halakhic thing, right? So that is right. That is the discussions that we're dealing with in the next couple of days, right? The outcomes of what you say, and that's something very important to remember. Just before I start, I just want to dedicate this morning's class to refuah shalema for my father-in-law. He's back in the hospital, so Yom and Shalata Masha may have a speedy recovery, and the learning that we do today go towards his speedy recovery for refuah shalema. So let's get cracking on this case. So the case like this, right? So you're in yeshiva, right? You're in college, right? You're out you're in camp, right? Whatever the situation is, you're in the dorm, right? You're in the dorm. And so you're in wherever it is where you're with a group of different people, right? With a group of different people. And this scenario happens. And I'm sure this has happened maybe in the office, right? It might happen in the office. And what is it? Right? It is, right, that your cufflinks, okay, in the office, maybe not your cufflinks, right? But something else, right? Your cufflinks all of a sudden disappear. Right, your MP3 player, right? So you see how old this book is, right? Your MP3 player disappears. Your smartphone, your CD case, right? Back when I was a kid, we used to say your Walkman, right? Remember the Walkman, right? Whatever it is, right? You have your little tchotchkes, your little things, something off your desk and work, something from camp, right? Disappears, right? And you're informed, someone has informed you that he believes that the culprit is your roommate and your friend, right? So it's your roommate, your friend, or, right, someone in the office that you know, and whoever it may be, doesn't make a difference, right? But that's who the culprit is. Should you distance yourself from your roommate or ignore the report? Should you hide your valuables, right? So it's a three-part question, right? Number one, right, do you distance yourself and from your roommate, right? So I think they're using this scenario as a roommate or a friend because, as we said, these cases are has a greater, if it's just a stranger, okay, so distance yourself from that stranger, right? You don't have great evidence, you don't have eyewitness, you don't have whatever, right? But that's sort of what the rumor is going around. Someone thought he saw him here, there, or whatever it is, right? So if it's just a stranger, someone that you don't really know, someone in the office, some kid in camp, whatever, okay, so just whatever, stay away. But this is your roommate, this is your friend, this is someone that you've been close with, someone that you've been hanging out with, someone in the community, whatever it is, and that's why they use this scenario, right? So do you distance your friendship because of this, right? Or ignore the report, right? Ignore it because you know this person, it's your friend, right? And then, right, part two, which might not be a contradiction to part one. I guess Terror Academy is having a drill.
There has been a report of an emergency.
Thank you.
Proceed calmly to the nearest exit and leave the building immediately.
We're not leaving. Okay, I could talk over that. Okay, that's very annoying. I hope they turn it off soon. There you go. No, I guess not. Let me reconcentrate. Give me a second.
Do not use the elevators.
Right, so part two of the question is regarding if you guys hear me. Yeah, okay, good. Right.
We hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So part two of the question is, right, you have to hide, or should you hide your valuables? And that doesn't make a difference of what answer number one is, right? Whatever the answer to question number one is, right? Question number two is, should you hide your valuables or not? Now, it's trickier in this scenario. If it's just a stranger, which you don't know, or it's not your roommate or something like that, so they might not notice if you're hiding your valuables or not. So, okay, go ahead and what kind of question is it? Be smart and hide your valuables, right? The question could be a little bit, because if you're hiding your valuables, it's showing that you're believing what you heard, right? And that plays into the Lashon Hara question. But I think the question over here is even deeper. And I think that's a theme of what they're trying to accomplish over here. If you start hiding your valuables, your roommate, your good friend will realize, right? Your bunkmate in camp, or your coworker that shares a cubicle with you, right, will realize that all of a sudden, your trinket from Hawaii that you brought into the office, right, is gone. It's not there anymore, right? They'll notice that, some of the things that you left around are not gone. So they'll realize, right, that the things are gone. And typically when something like this happens and there's already a shmua, there's already you heard it from someone that this person's the culprit, right? It means to say that this person probably heard that people think that he's the culprit, right? That's probably what people are going to think. So therefore, right, by you going ahead and removing the things, right, you're not only, right, protecting yourself, but also the outcome can be that your roommate, who's going to notice that, is going to realize that you're buying in, at least the way he looks at it, that you're buying into this idea that he's the culprit. Right. So that, I think, is what makes this question a little deeper, a little harder, with a little more zest. Right, this question, right, than your typical question of, okay, of course, we talked about it before, lock your doors, right? You're living in an area that's dangerous, or anywhere, you should lock your doors, but you live in an area that's dangerous, make sure you have a alarm system, right? If it's a dangerous place, don't walk out at night, by yourself, or whatever it is. We talked about that, that's of course. So what's this question more than that? So I think what this question is adding, right, is this idea, right, that that from your actions, right, the person's going to realize that you are, according to him at least, buying into this idea, right? So the outcome that comes out, I think, is a discussion that we're trying to deal with. Let me hear what you guys have to say. Anybody, any thoughts? No.
I'd ignore the report.
Say that again.
I'd ignore it. If it was a friend, it's me.
Okay, Sarah's saying she'll ignore the report. Okay.
Until they had.
I'm glad we're friends. You're a real friend. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Susan.
I think you said it, and we have learned that we can't act on it. So even though it is, information that might trouble us, which is the hard part, we're not supposed to act on it in any way. So as I understand it, you don't change anything. You don't change any of your actions towards that person or with that person. That's what I understand from the prior weeks of these discussions.
Okay,
You
but what are your
cannot
feelings?
act on the information.
What are your feelings? Yeah, you're wording your words very carefully. I picked up on that.
I think it's difficult. It's troubling. It's troubling, but you can't act on it. So even though I think the feelings that I would have are that I'm likely to have in a situation, are, extreme disappointments and, questioning trust, but I cannot act on that, or I'm not supposed to. Probably I will, but that's not the right thing to do.
Okay.
That's what I understand from the prior week's discussions.
Okay. I hear you. So you're following along, not so much for the same reason as Sherry was saying, but you're taking that route of not saying anything based off what we've learned in the past.
Correct.
Okay, next, Emily, you don't have anything to say?
Can I just say, it was very interesting. This is Bonnie. So Sharon's response was immediate. Suzette was very diplomatic, very logical, very thoughtful, as I think you pointed out. And I think we have all learned, or I certainly learned, you don't take things at face value. Just because they said doesn't mean it is fact. And I think, you just become a little more cautious, but you don't sort of drive yourself nutty.
Okay, along the same lines as Suzette, you got to be a little more cautious, like Sherry's saying. Emily, you were about to say something, and I'm sorry I didn't put you on the spot. You're just a little surprised that you weren't saying anything. Right, you're sort of one of our major talkers, or additional, not talkers, but one. Okay, I'm sticking my mouth in my foot in my mouth. Go ahead. Em.
No, I was just gonna ask you, can you just, what page is it? I heard it, but I wanna.
Sorry, 228, day 78, page 228.
Okay, I heard it. I just have to, I don't know. I mean, I guess I agree with what everyone said, that you're not allowed to accept Lashon Hara. But
Okay.
it doesn't mean that you're not gonna, I don't know. For me, I think I wouldn't accept it, but at the same time, it's very hard to not act on it. It's very hard to not be like, oh, I don't believe it. It's very hard to pretend you didn't hear it, and to not, once someone says something like that, now it's in your mind.
Right. I mean, that's exactly the danger of Lashon Hara in the first place, but you're right.
Like it's going to be hard not to hide your stuff, or not to, I don't know. I think I would just ask them, hey, have you seen my whatever MP3 player, or whatever it is that I don't know. I would just ask them, have you seen it?
Okay.
Or I asked the person who told you, like, why would you say that?
Right. Do you have any proof, any evidence, or what?
Any evidence? Like, okay, I hear that, but like, why are you telling me this? Why do you think that's true?
Right. Okay. Good point. Anybody else? Good point. Very good point. Martha?
I was just going to say, would anybody said, like, not a trap, but maybe hide your major valuables and put something out there and see if it disappears, and maybe keep an eye on the person. I mean, I've had roommates through college I'm still friends with 50 years later. But sometimes I get accused of things in the house, just misplacing them. So I had a son that would charge me for accusations. He reminds me.
So you're saying, so you're taking the approach that you should hide your stuff, or you should try to investigate a little more and see what's going on. And not, just say, I'm not trusting this. It's my friend, it's my roommate. I'm not gonna do anything about this. You're saying that you should try to do something, or investigate, or something like that. Hide your stuff.
Just keep an eye.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Any other thoughts? But
another possibility, I'm not
Okay,
sure
go
if I
ahead,
would
Judy.
agree with it. I'm not sure if I'd agree with it. With more thought would be to tell your roommate you're hiding your valuables, so he knows you are, and do hide them, and then that way he kind of knows you're being aware of the fact that there has been a problem with somebody, without saying he's that the roommate's the one who did it. Just an idea.
Okay, I actually like that idea. We'll expand on that a little bit. I see Bonnie getting all excited. But I like that idea. Let's expand on that in a couple of minutes after we get into the halacha, okay? That's a beautiful addition. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? Okay, so let's see what the halacha has to say. I think you guys are going to be a little surprised what the halacha has to say, and then we're sort of gonna, but we're gonna touch upon your concerns and explain how it all works out, and then we're gonna take what Judy just said and tie that in. The halacha says like this: you may not accept the report as true. Right? You cannot accept the report as true. It's lashon hara, right? As we said, there's no facts, there's no eyewitnesses, right? As Emily pointed out, go ahead and ask the person, what's your source, what's your this, how do you do that? And that you're allowed to do, that you should do 100%. We cannot accept it as true, nor should you change the way you treat the person in question, right? We spoke about the aftermath. You cannot treat the person differently, right? Because since you cannot accept it as true, you cannot, start distancing yourself from the person. You cannot start talking negative about the person. You can't be sucked into the vacuum of lashon hara, right, which creates negativity. And I think that's something that you all were saying, and that's very important. And it's hard. It is hard. It's not easy, as Suzette was saying, and Emily and Bonnie, right? You all were saying, right, and others, right? You all were saying that we hear something, it affects us, and that's reality, and that is the danger of lashon hara. But we have to work extra hard to make sure that we don't fall prey, right, to the vacuum of lashon hara. But at the same time, and this is where the caveat. However, you should look into the situation further, like we were saying, right? And meanwhile, take precautions to protect yourself based on what you've heard. For instance, don't leave your wallet lying around, right? So even though we're not allowed to believe it, and since you're a good friend, you cannot change your behavior. It's a stranger, as we said. Okay, so whatever. So we just, whatever. It's someone I don't really know, someone I haven't really been hanging out with. So just keep it, and it doesn't really affect me, right? But since it is a friend, it's a colleague, it's a roommate, whatever it is, and you do have a daily routine, daily interaction, you cannot change that, right? Because that is believing the lashon hara. But at the same time, as we said, right, you're not allowed. You can't just stand around and let yourself get hurt. Right, you're not allowed to. Right, that's you can't get hurt. You're not allowed to let yourself be hurt. Right, that's why we put locks on our doors. Right, that's why we have a police force. Right, that's why we protect ourselves. So therefore, you have to come up with a creative way, right, or make sure that you're not careless about leaving things around. So you're right. If you have something that's been out the whole time, so then that's a difficult situation of how to remove it without him or her figuring it out. But you have to be more cautious of leaving your wallet around, right? You should be more cautious of leaving your keys or your things around, this is where we get into what Judy said. It's beautiful. I actually did not think about this. Thank you, Judy. Right? It's a beautiful thought that you just said. You could say, listen, I'm sure you've heard, right? Not make it nonchalant friends, I'm sure you've heard that there's been some stuff, crazy. Someone or maybe someone broke in, or I don't know, right? And you can make it play it really dumb and believe it, because again, you're not allowed to believe that he's the one that's doing it, right? He or she's the one that's doing it, but say something to that effect, and therefore, I think it's you should probably also. I think I'm gonna put some of my stuff away, right? Because. It's so important that this really means a lot, or whatever it is. I think it's time to be a little safer, right? So, Judy, that's a phenomenal idea. I really like it, right? And if it's not that, something else to that effect, where you could come up, have that conversation, right? Play dumb about the individual, right? But at the same time, right, protect yourself, because those are not, as I said, question number 2 does not rely on how we answer question number 1, right? Question number 2, should you hide your valuables? Protecting yourself, right, does not rely on how number 1, you have to protect yourself, right? You have to protect yourself, right? At the same time, it has to be done in a way, right, where you're complying with the idea that we can't trust what we heard, right? Of course, if there's evidence, there's a video camera, right, recording, or two people saw, right? And I don't want to get into exactly what the Jewish law requires and not doesn't require, but it's been pretty obvious, caught red-handed, whatever it is. So that's something else, right? We can't judge the person, right? Remember, can't judge the person, but if you know something's true, you have to act on it, right? But in this situation, you can't even trust it, but you still have to react on it. And that's sort of the tricky thing in Judaism, right? It's not black and white, right? The gray area is tremendous, right? And by meaning gray area, not like how the world looks at it. Oh, it's quasi. No, because there's so many different ramifications, so many different levels, so many different things. And we gotta look at every situation, right? And we got to be able to, based off the rules that we have, see how the situation plays out. And there might be seemingly two contradictory things that we're playing with, right? Like over here, on one hand, we're not believing him, lashon hara, right? But at the other hand, right, there's this idea that you have to protect yourself, right? And therefore, you have to try in a creative way to save your stuff or hide your stuff, or make sure that you act in a way that doesn't put the temptation in front of your friend, like leaving your wallet around, right? So even though that is implying that you think that person did it, but it's not, because you're still not allowed to believe it, right? So you're really, right? We're going to use our thumbs now, right? We're really, right? Sort of taking two opposite ways of looking at something, and we're looking at them individuals, right? And each one trying to accomplish that halacha, and therefore we're sort of in this gray area, sort of calling it a gray area, right? The gray area I know out in the world is like, quasi whatever. It's not really, because this is halacha, right? But sort of just for clarification's sake, sort of a gray area of where I'm doing two different things that are sort of seemingly are contradictory to each other, but they're not, because that's what the halacha tells me to do. Is that clear? Any questions, comments on what we just said? Anybody?
So,
Okay.
may I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my revised understanding is that you act, but not in, you don't act, to accuse, or you don't confront, but you act to protect yourself. So you do act, but not towards the person, but rather to protect yourself. Exactly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. You're right. You cannot act against the person, but you got to act to protect yourself.
Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else? Okay, so then let's move on. Okay, so now I just want to what we spoke about last week. I jumped last week to page 229. Grow your good eyes, right? So I'm not going to go through it again, but just want to, what we spoke about last week, talking in a positive way, not in a negative way, right? The different examples that we gave, right, was on page 229. So please feel free to read through the whole paragraph, the whole page, more than a paragraph, of talking more into that idea. But I'm not going to get into that right now. We're going to move forward. But just let's do the quote of the day, because I think it's very important. It's the Ksav Sofer in the book of Esther, right? The Ksav Sofer, just a little history, the Ksav Sofer didn't live that long ago. The Ksav Sofer lived in the late 1800s, and he was a son of the Chassam Sofer, right? The Chassam Sofer was world renowned, right? He was very close with Samson Fall Hirsch. I lived in that same era, right? They had very different views of how to approach, certain things. The Chassam Sofer was from Pressburg, right, Hungary, and a much more, hardcore, as you might call it, approach, where Samson Fall Hirsch started the whole Torah Derech Eretz, right? Derech Eretz, not of course referring to good action, good good behavior because everybody beholds with that. Their hearts in the way of going to school, work, and things like that, right? And they both fought the Haskalah movement in Germany, and I highly recommend to read the biography of Samson and Falhurst. But Sam Sofer and Samson and Falhurst were extremely close, right? They respected each other as Torah giants and respected each other's way of dealing things within the confines of the Torah. And the Ksav Sofer was Sam Sofer's son, and took that the same approach as his father, right? And was a Torah giant. But so it's important to know the background, because sometimes people think that people that have hardcore views on certain things, right? They don't care about people, right? And God forbid, right? It's just they have certain values that they feel that they have to, teach other people. And it's the way they present those values doesn't mean to say that they don't care about other people. So this is Ksav Sofer saying true peace is when people feel love for one another and are happy for each other's good fortune, right? That's true peace, right? And that's what Ksav Sofer was saying, right? From the book of Esther, he was talking about from the book of Esther. I know we have 2 Adars this year, so Purim is an extra month away, right? But we're already getting it sort of into the spirit a little bit, right? By getting into the first Adar very soon, next week, right? So he's referring to, this is coming from, because it says Simcha, the Jewish people had light and joyous and gladness, right? But we know also, right, that after the Purim, so the Jewish people reached the level of tranquility, of peace, right? They all of a sudden all the enemies washed away, right? The king was on their side, of course, with God's help, right? And within a couple of years, they were turned back to Eretz Yisrael to start building the second base of Mikdash. So, but what do we see? The idea of the Purim story is, right? The idea of the Purim story is achvas v'reus, is building friendship, building camaraderie, working with one another, right? And building that idea of looking at the other person and recognizing them for who they are, right? And embracing that and building that brotherly love, that family environment, right? That's why one of the mitzvahs of Purim is to give mishloach manos, is to give, right, a sort of a food package kind of thing, right, to someone else, because really it's supposed to build that friendship. Look, I'm going to come give you something, you give me something, or give someone else something, right? It's brought down that a lot of times we go through our list, right? We make our list from Shlach Manos, right? We go through the list, who we're going to give this, and we don't want to miss anybody, of course, and have different people of different whatever. It's always, but we go through our list, right? And usually we think about who we want to give, and I'm not everybody, of course, but we think about who we want to give. Oh, who's our friends, right? Let's give our friends. And of course, you should give your friends, right? But Nishlach Manos says you should think the other way around. Who have I been having a hard time with this past year, right? Who have I, last couple of months been struggling with? That's who you're supposed to give Nishlach Manos to, right? On the contrary, because Nishlach Manos is supposed to bring that achva, that areus, that relationship back together, right? Saying, look, let's put everything aside. Let's break bread together. Let's I'm going to give you some food, right? And really, of course, halachically, any food is kosher for mishloach manos, right? But the Talmud tells us that it should really be something that theoretically might be able to be used for the Purim Suda, right? Because sort of that was the Talmud says that one rabbi brought this and one rabbi brought that to each other, and then they used that food, right, for the Purim Suda. They went ahead and they ate together. And now, it doesn't have to be that way. Halachically, it's fine, and you're not going to be eating with everybody. I mean, unless you come to Yitzchak Purim Suda, of course, right? You're all welcome, right? But at least the concept of think of someone that you've been, struggling with, or someone that you have been having a hard time with. That's who should be on the list, right? On your list to make sure that you give mishloach manos. And actually, I've found it worked for me a couple times, right? So someone that we've been having back and forth a little bit, and whatever it is, and I went and gave them mishloach manos, right? Then I made an effort. I myself went in, right, and sent one of the kids in, right? And we made sure. And the relationship got much better afterwards, right? Listen, there's always struggles, and especially in communities and things, and see things differently. But we always have to be working to see each other's good fortune, right? To be part of the other person, right? And that's how we come to true peace, to true achva. And that's what Ksav Sofer is saying. Now, why is this in here? It's a great quote. Right? But why is it in the quote in the book of that we're learning about Lashon Hara? Is obvious, right? Because as we spoke about last week, right, and that's what the Grow Your Good Eyes, right, talks about. Then when we train ourselves to see positive about other people, and when we train ourselves to see the good fortune of other people and do things for other people that are good, we're gonna have a much harder time talking negative about them. And if we just went ahead and gave them a shachmanis because we want to build that relationship, and we went ahead and bought them flowers, and bought them a card, or bought them a nice bottle of whatever, right? Or even just inviting them for a meal, or decided to go for a walk with them, or whatever you're doing, something small, or whatever it is, right? You just went over to them at Kiddush and sat next to them to sit next to them at Kiddush, whatever it is, you're gonna have a much harder time next time talking negative about them because you just did an act of positivity. Right? Not only a thought, but an act of positivity. It builds it within you, right? Your body, right, just did something positive about the person. So how can you go ahead and not talk negative about the person, right? Now I'm not saying it's foolproof, right? We're still human, right? But it's definitely a good direction with other things, right? Of course, of training yourself to speak positive, especially towards this individual, right? By doing an act of kindness, right? Seeing their good fortune, trying to build that relationship, and they'll definitely help you of making sure that you don't go ahead and talk negative or say something negative about them, right? So that's the depth of why this quote is in right here and makes sense right after what they spoke about in Grow Your Good Eyes. Any questions or comments before we move to the next halacha? I want to grab one more halacha if possible. If not, that's fine. We'll do it next week. Any questions or comments on what we just spoke about? Okay, so let's move on. All right, let's turn the page to day 79. I think this is something very interesting, right? And we'll try to get through all this. If not, we'll continue next week. That's 9:36 already. I hate keeping you guys longer than needed, but it's nice to see you all still staying on. All right. So the question's like this. The dilemma is that coworker, friend, neighbor, blah, 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 whatever, right? When it mentions to you that his daughter just got engaged, Mazel Tov, right? Mazel Tov, right? And then he mentions the chassan's name, right? The Chaim Yankel, our best friend, Chaim Yankel, right? Chaim Yankel is the chassan, right? He's the chassan, right? So you're surprised, right? You know this young man, right? You've seen him glued to his smartphone during davening, right? Schmoozing away during the night seder. There's learning time, right? You see him not acting so, a little reckless at other times, right? Knowing this is not who your coworker would choose for his daughter, right? Because you know him a little bit. You smooth about, he's mentioned to you many times. Oh, do you know a boy for my girl, right? And that she needs best, right? So that's not someone that you necessarily looking for, right? So do you say something or not? Yet you're certain, because you know this guy. He realizes that he's impulsive, right? You're certain that the second you inform him, right, your coworker, he'll be on the phone breaking off the engagement. Can you tell him the information? How can you prevent him from jumping on your information before he checks it out for himself? All right, so there's 2 points over here. Number one, before we delve into this, and if anybody needs to go, please feel free to. I have a couple extra minutes today, so I will catch another one in. So I would love to delve into this today. All right. There's a couple of points I want to bring out over here before we hear from the crowd, from you guys. Number one is the severity of what you are aware of, right? Being on your smartphone during davening is not a good thing. It's a terrible thing, right? Davening is davening time. But it's not like, he saw the guy going into McDonald's and eating, non-kosher food, right? because he's kosher observant, right? So number one, the severity of what it is. So, but you still know that this person, that's something that really bothers him and something that bothers a lot of people. And, the girl probably wouldn't want someone like that, but it's also more talking about the character of the person. It's not just that. What he's trying to show is that he's not a serious guy he like sort of walks the walk and talk the talk, but he's not really serious about his Judaism in the sense of he's serious about it, he does it, but sort of the more meaning behind it and putting the time and effort into it. It's some of the examples that they gave, right? It could be other things, right? And it could be vice versa. It's the girl and certain things. So number one, we have to think about the severity of what you heard. Number two, right, is that don't forget, this is what you've seen.
Not what you heard, though, what you actually saw, right?
Yes, what you've seen. That's the case. Not what you heard. Right? What you heard, of course, you're not allowed to, right? It's what you've seen, right? It says clearly, right? You've seen him glued to his smartphone. Very careful, right? I know this is not the Talmud and the Torah, which we dissect every letter and every word, but they're careful about what they said, right? It's what you've seen. Good point, Emily, right? But at the same time, right? You also have to realize that you are putting all these things together, and this is the reaction that you got, right? And when you're going to go ahead and tell it to your friend, it's going to come out much more like this guy's just a litzanus. This guy's just someone that Judaism's not really mean to him. Maybe it does. He's struggling with this. Whatever. A lot of people. It's happened to me. 3 things that you've seen, right? Different times, right? But it doesn't mean to say that on other things he's not serious, right? That's another thing that you have to think about, right? And also, they're very careful to mention the reaction of the individual that you're telling it to, right? How much does that play a role or not? And let's say that he's not a reactor. He's done. So, Scott, let me know. Let me look into this and that. I'll do my research, right? Right? Would that change the situation? Then if you know that he's impulsive and he jumps onto it and he's going to go ahead and make and break the shit out of you, I can't believe it, what's going on, right? No, I'm going to call it. It's over. It's done, right? That's how the guy is, right? Or is it no? Oh, thanks. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate it. I appreciate you looking out for us. Right? Let me look into this a little more. Let me research it. Let me see. Let me talk to my daughter. Right? Blah 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 blah. Does it make a difference if you're allowed to say something or not based off the reaction, right, of the individual? Those are some of the things I want you guys to think about. Anybody?
Why don't you ask this coworker, say, how about going to a minion with me and put him in the situation where he can observe the guy?
You could do that. Maybe he does even davens in the same show with you, but he davens up front, and he's more. If you're dealing with someone that this drives him so crazy, this scenario, right? Which of course it's not a good thing. But if this is something that's going to make, it's most probably that he davens in the front of the shul. Maybe he does daven in the shul. Maybe he davens in the front of the shul and he focuses on his davening. He's oblivious to what's going on around him, right? Or maybe it's just something that's not possible. You live in 2 different parts of town and he has his routine and it's going to look very fishy, very strange. You say, hey, why don't you come to my shul? It's, why the heck am I coming to your shul, right? I live, let's say, for example, let's say it's Toronto, right? So I live in Bathurst and Lawrence, right, area. And this guy lives, in Thornhill, which is about a 45-minute drive without traffic, right? One to the other. And they're telling, well, why don't you come to Shachris to my shul? Are you crazy? Right? I'm going to have to Shachris. I go ready to 6:45 Shachris. I'm going to have to daven at 4. I'm going to have to wake up 45 minutes earlier than normal. What am I waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I like getting to shul 10 minutes early, right? Then I have to get dressed and have my coffee and all that. So I'm going to wake up at like 5:15 to come to your shul. Like, why? Right? So
well, tell them why.
No. Can I just interject here?
Please.
I think with a shotgun, it would be a crime. You could say, have you asked other people or, I remember receiving a phone call from somebody asking me about, somebody was going to get engaged and asking me about their character. And I was like so reluctant, I didn't know what to say. And they said, no, this is the time where you have to, because this is like a pending marriage. And without that information, think about what's ultimately going to happen.
That's true. That's true. The person told you that because they wanted the information, but we spoke about this. Giving information, you have to be very careful, even though it's pending marriage, of course. But you have to realize, first of all, that we are always biased, nothing against any individual. We're always biased based off what we think, right? Other people might have different view. Again, it's not, if it's something clear cut that, as we said, you see the person, constantly cheating on their taxes, so then, yeah, that's something that's straightforward. But if they're asking about character, about personality, about things like that, you always have to be very careful, and you have to make sure that you are the right person that really knows this person, right? And could give that information, right, with a certainty, right? Before the information. Not every person is allowed to give information. We spoke.
I understand, for sure.
Right.
And
So
right.
So I'm saying over here, right, this happened to be that it fell in your lap, right? Because you heard and you happened to see this person and you know this person a little bit from around the community and things like that, right? You might not even be their best friend. You might not be the one that's hanging out with them, right? You see them around the community, right? We all see people around the community that we have a certain view on, right? A certain way of looking at them. Does that mean to say that they're bad people? Does that mean to say that this is how they are always? Right? Okay, so they struggle with this a little bit. Does that play out to their whole Judaism, right? So you have to be very careful. Yes, you have to be careful about the future of the girl, and you also have to be careful about the future of this marriage, because you know what? Sometimes the father could be hot-headed and he's going to jump to conclusions, but this is the best the girl needs, right? The father has one vision what the girl needs, and it could be the girl knows exactly what the guy is all about, right? They talked about it, they schmoozed about it, right? And she feels that this is something that she's still willing to go through, and she'll either try to help.
Well, the halacha, it does say that, you can actually say something, what it says, I might not have seen the whole picture, so don't go on my say so.
You're reading the answer already. You're Bonnie.
Yeah.
That's cheating.
Well,
Right? We're gonna get to that. I don't know what you guys think. We're gonna get to that in a minute. Right? Yes, there are ways of saying things and ways of trying to minimize it. We're gonna get to that in a minute. Right? But first, let's hear what you all have to say. Cindy, what do you have to say?
Well, reading it says you're certain that he'll be on the phone breaking off the engagement.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're going to tell him, I also read that if you disclose, listen, I'm going to tell you something, but please hear me out first and let's not overreact. But it says he's the one that's in control of this anyway. So it says, you inform your court, he'll be on the phone breaking off the engagement. You want to give him information so that he can continue doing what he was doing already, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
So you give him the information, and like it says, just say, listen, I'm giving, or you could ask him, do you want to know what I know? And whatever you hear, please think about it before you react.
Okay, so similar to what Bonnie was saying, that we put caution in your words. Okay, I agree. I hear that. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Sima.
I think it's imperative that that you share, since you've seen it firsthand, that you share the information in a way that, in an acceptable way, as it says, maybe giving the disclaimer first, because if you don't, well, things could turn out not so good, and you find out that the person who either made the shidduch or whatever knew all this information, and it was never shared with you. And maybe had you known information about that person, the marriage never would have occurred.
Okay. I see you're all along the same lines. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Is it possible that you could share the information maybe like with this guy's wife talk to the girl. If the father is so intense and is going to react that way, maybe it's best that you reach out to someone else, you know? And that's like a weird, I think there's like a weird scenario that the father would, like, the minute you said that, he would break off the engagement without checking into it further, without, I don't know, it just, and he's in charge anyway. Like, it sounds like the guy himself is not so healthy. Like, the father himself is a little bit of a nut job, but if it was me, I would want to tell, like, maybe I would talk to the wife, or I would talk to the girl and say, listen, I just want to, there's some observations that I've made. I'm not really sure why. I'm sure there's, maybe there's a reason, but I think I just want to let you know. But I would avoid talking to the father.
Okay.
I have a question. Would this be any different? Would this be any different of a scenario if the father was an even-keeled guy? Why is the question different just because he kind of loses his temper?
Oh, I asked that. That was my question, Cindy. Great question. That was one of my questions, right? Would there be a difference? Great question, right? Would there be a difference if this person is a even-keeled guy? And Emily is making the assumption, right? I'm not saying a wrong assumption, right? That there would make a difference, right? Because he said, because if he's it's what they're seemingly you're pointing out, as you're pointing out also, Cindy, is that they're saying that this person's going to jump to conclusions, right? And therefore react in a crazy way, right? What happens if he's not? He's an even keel guy. He's so then we're all in consensus that it's okay to say something just the way it is, right? Or not. Or there's also some or be careful of how you're saying things, right?
I would go ask the rabbi.
Let's get the rabbi involved, right? First of all, Chayle, your answer is spot on, right? Because when difficult situation, no, and I want to expand on that, right? But before we would say that, Cindy, that's a great point, and that's something that we do have to analyze and see, and that might make a tremendous difference of how we do react to the scenario, right? That is a great point. That we have to focus on. But just to home in a little bit on Chayle, I was saying, if you have the opportunity, right, especially in something difficult like this, to speak to, and maybe Emily, that's who you're referring to, maybe speak to someone else. And I would say this, even if the person's an even keel guy or, down to earth, you could talk to them. He's not going to jump to conclusion and all that kind of stuff. And if there's someone else that you could talk to, and I wouldn't say necessarily the wife, right, or even a family member, but someone that knows the boy, right? Someone that knows the boy and knows the family. So if it's the rabbi of the shul, right, or if it's a rebbe of the person, or your own rabbi, and you're not sure exactly how to deal with this, even if they might not know the family, I would say, hey, what am I supposed to do in this scenario, right? On one hand, this is what I've seen. On the other hand, I know that I don't see the guy all the time. He might be doing tremendous chesed and does other things. And right, I know him from around the communities. I see him at night in the kollel, and I see him, during the day at chakras and the mini. Hey, he's coming to chakras, which is a lot better than a lot of other people, right? We get in shul, in the morning chakras, so we get anywhere from 10 to 15 to 17 people. There's a lot more men in town than that, right? So he's coming to chakras. We got to look at that, right? Okay, so he's on his cell phone, right? Part of it, right? But he's coming to chakras. So there's a lot of, again, we're not talking about something extreme. We're not talking about something where it's like a clear cut. I've seen him, right, do something that's to knock some old lady down on purpose. Or, I knocked you down, right? We're not talking about something extreme, right? We're not talking about something that will like. Right, but we are talking about something that would definitely be sensitive, something that this family definitely would care about tremendously and means a lot to them. Right? But at the same time, you got to look at the whole perspective. Again, as I said, he goes to night seder. Right? Okay, so he's not the best learner, but at least he's in night seder learning instead of going to a sports bar, right? Nothing wrong with going to sports bars, but instead of going to a sports bar every night, right? So you gotta look at the whole scenario. You have your vision. You say you see what he's doing and you see that negative, but through that negative, there's also, he's still doing something that's right. And maybe that's what they see, or maybe it's not your place to say something, because let them work that out. Again, if it's something that's,
But they have to know about it.
to what degree do you have to go ahead and say something, right? That's the question. To what degree you have to say something, right? We know a lot of things about people. If you really stop and think about it, even people that are good people do things that are not always right, right? Let's be honest, right? I'm sure you all have, right? If you think about it, something that I might have done, right, or do, right, that's not like, oh my gosh, right? Okay, maybe by driving, right? I've got a lot better on that, right? I see a lot of smirks going on there, right? But saying this, so if does that define the person? So, and yes, that's something that they. And when we go ahead and say something, especially in a sensitive situation and a sensitive time of when someone just got engaged and whatever it is, and who we say to, even if it's a even-headed, calm person, it's not going to jump to conclusion. It's still, you're talking about their. So, what I'm trying to bring out, what Chayle is saying is, right, always a good idea. And Emily was pointing out to that, also trying to find someone else, if you're able to, right, that knows the situation or is able to, assess it and say, hey, how do I deal with this? That's always a safe way of going about. But what happens if we don't have that, right? We don't have that ability. For whatever reason, we don't have that ability. So you all been hinting and, saying what the halacha advises. And first of all, right, remember, advise caution. Always remember, this is something very delicate, and you have to be very, very careful whenever dealing with this, right? But right, if you don't have an opportunity to speak to the rabbi, or to, I would call it punt it off to the rabbi kind of thing, right? It's nothing wrong with doing that sometimes, right? You have to be very careful of how you disclose your information, right? And how you paint the situation, right? Like you could say, hey, listen, hey, this guy, wow, yeah, I see him in chakras every morning, right? He's come tonight, just wanted to make you aware, and it's something that I've seen, but please check it out, and you guys have been saying these words, but first start off with something positive, right? Don't just paint it all negative, right? But then go ahead and say, listen, I just wanted to make you aware of something that I've noticed, but maybe, I'll definitely check it out and see, and more investigate into it, maybe speak to his Rebbe or whatever it is about this, he comes to chakras, which is great, better than other people, but, I see him on his cell phone a lot, right? I see him on his cell phone a lot during chakras, right? Now, what does it mean a lot during chakras? But during the Amida, right? When he's saying the Amida, he's on his cell phone, right? Right? Or is it like, during Chazar Shas, repetition of the Amida, which is not the right thing, right? But he's still answering a main, is it, while he's waiting for the rabbi to finish Shema, or is it like, at the end of davening, you have to remember there's different times of different things that are going on. It's not just you just say something like he's on his cell phone the whole davening. It sounds terrible. It sounds like, he's during the Amida, he's on his cell phone, watching the sports game while he's saying, Slach Lanu, ooh, look at that pass, right? Like, that's not, you have to be very careful of how you say things, not only in this situation, always. It's something to be aware of. Now, when you say and you give over information, right, if you just say something like that, right, a million things could start rolling in the other person's head that you never intended to, right? You just wanted to make them aware that, this is something that, but so you have to be careful how you present it. Right, that is so crucial. And me personally, if I was in a situation like this, right, I would probably start off with something. Chaim Yankel, right, our buddy Chaim Yankel, right, Chaim Yankel, he davens in my shul. He comes to shul every chakras. It's unbelievable, right? He comes to shul, right? Just something, just I don't know if it's something big, just definitely, just something just to think about. I've seen him, during Chazar Shas, he takes out his cell phone, right? And he looks at his smartphone, right? He takes out his cell phone and looks at it. And I don't know who says smartphones anymore. I think all cell phones are almost smartphones. Of course, there are not, but we just say our cell phones, right? But say it in that kind of way, right? Cushion it, say something positive about the person, because there is positive things. Okay, we're not talking about someone that's rotten to the core. You know, someone's rotten to the core, and they push old ladies, or you know, they curse all the time and things like that. So then that's something else. We're not talking about that. Right? We're talking about someone that you know, he has good character traits, right? You know, he has good things, but certain flaws. So you have to make sure that you do it in a healthy manner, right? And you have to use your wisdom, right? You have to use your wisdom. It's not something that is a cookie cutter kind of thing, because you have to know what it is that you've seen that, you know, bothers you and you feel that will bother them, right? What is this? They just gave one example, right? You have to really, do you know this boy? Right? You know, do you know what else they do or not? Right? So you see one aspect of them a day and that's it. So now you're gonna, right? So there's you have to play that out. So I don't know the boy all day. I just, you know, I daven with him and it's great. He davens, right? And it comes to shul, right? And that's a big thing. But just from the little bit that I know him, you know, this one little part of it, you know, I just wanted to make you aware. But do research, and I'm sure you've done your research, and he's a great boy, and he does wonderful things all day and things like that. Just wanted to make you aware of this, right? You hear I'm saying that? Does it sound so bad now? That where I come and say, Chaim Yankel? Chaim Yankel is on his phone all day in chakras, right? Chaim Yankel's on the phone during chakras the whole time. You hear the difference? How's your reaction, right? When you hear the information of, you know, oh, Chaim Yankel? Yeah, I don't know him so well, but he davens chakras with me 6:45 minyan every day. Right, it's great. He really helps out with the minyan. Right, it just you know, there's something just to check into. You know, during Chazar Shashas, he's on his phone. Right, that's something just to think about. Right, so that's I think something really important. Right, and this really works whenever we're dealing with information. Right, that we can't. We have to be sensitive about. We don't have full picture. We have one piece of it. Right. To cushion it, and its cushioning is not like, you know, oh, you don't want the blow to be too hard. It's more for you, because you don't have all information. You don't want to be over lashon hara, and you don't want the reaction of the other person, even if he is a level-headed person, right? Still, you hear something like, "Chaim Yankel on his phone the whole davening." Then, if you hear it in a different way, right? Even though you're going to level-head it, you're going to go check it in, you already have made a picture in your brain that he's on his phone the whole davening. Right, and then the terrible thing, the way you heard it, right? So we have to be so careful of how we present that information. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and thanks for staying on a little longer today.